Why didn't the Chinese government want people flying DJI Phantoms next to this monument? Usually monuments a lot of people take pictures of, it's usually fine. Was this like Tiananmen Square? Was that why they didn't want any aerial footage in case there's a protest? Was that the situation?
Yes.
It's a constant back and forth between government and, the private sector. I was wondering, as a businessman, what kind of concessions did you have to make, especially relating to China and what you shared with us, what happened there? Can you give us details and what concessions you had to make?
Well, I think there's been a number of times, for instance, in Europe, where they do have their regulations in place. One of the regulations, it depends on what type of license you have and what type of flight you're doing and what you have approval for that particular day, how far of a radius you can fly out. It also depends on where you are, right? And so they'll file for, we want to fly at this location for this purpose with this machine, and then they get back, okay, you can fly to 300 meter radius and 100 meter altitude or 200 meter altitude or whatever. They get those regulations, and they wanted us to be able to make our systems fall within those regulations. And so this is a perfect example of that, and we just simply upgraded the firmware of our autopilot systems to be able to limit, and you can actually do it right from your phone. When you land, you can use your iOS software to limit the altitude and the radius that your aircraft flies under GPS. So that way, as an operator, you know that you're flying within regulation, because it's hard to tell, am I 275 meters away or am I 325 meters away? Because one is within regulation, one's not. And so this way we can put a limit at 300 meters, and that, when it doesn't fly any farther, you're at your limit. And so those are the kinds of things that we can do to work with regulations, work with regulators and legislators as a technology firm that can have us working hand in hand so that we can make these things safe and make them comfortable with them, with integrating small unmanned aerial systems into the national airspace.
Can you tell us what happened in China with the city that banned you? Because we're really interested about that.
Yeah, so let me check into it and see if I can get back to you with some more specific details on that. But, long story short is there was a certain, national monument that the Chinese government didn't want our systems to be able to fly near. So we said, okay, we'll limit the system so that if it's under GPS, it won't take off. It won't fly in that area. So it's just one more example of how we can use the technology to make regulators and legislators more comfortable.
Why didn't the Chinese government want people flying DJI Phantoms next to this monument? Usually monuments a lot of people take pictures of, it's usually fine. Was this like Tiananmen Square? Was that why they didn't want any aerial footage in case there's a protest? Was that the situation?
Yeah, so I don't think that, and I know it sounds really interesting because it's China and they're maybe nefarious and oh my gosh, but it's really, was such a non-issue that I literally can't even remember exactly where it was, or it wasn't a big concern. It was more of a public safety concern, and so we said okay, no problem, and we made some adjustments for them. But yeah, shoot me an email, let me get some details on it, and I can share with you exactly what the story was, because I think we're more than happy to share it. I just don't want to misquote or speak exactly what city it was in and what monument it was.
Because that's also my major concern is government shutting down technology and suppressing dissent. Because when I got the DJI Phantom, to me it's a perfect way to cover protests that police close off. A lot of times I cover protests, police block it off, do a lot of horrible things, destroy video evidence, and to me the DJI Phantom is an amazing tool that can actually show exactly what's happening, and the police can't shut it down. But if your company sets the GPS limit where we can't fly it in a protest zone, like say a hypothetical situation would occur where Occupy Wall Street's going on down in Zuccotti Park in New York City. If the police and government would come to you and ask you to disable that GPS feature and make sure that no one could fly DJI Phantom and show what's happening as they block off the area, beat up people, kick people out, would your company be willing to do that?
Yeah. Sorry, give me 1 second. This is my partner.
Sorry. Yeah, I can wait.
Frank, so...
Sorry, it was a long hypothetical question.
No, I know exactly, and don't worry, I'm right with you. Okay, so I understand your concern of technology companies working too closely with regulators and stifling, being able to report on what's actually happening, right? And so I guess what I want to do is make sure that the distinction is made that what we're trying to do as a technology company is not necessarily enforce laws. What we're trying to do is give the user the necessary tools to know whether or not they are following the laws, so that they can't say, well, I didn't know that I was 325 meters away. I had no way to tell how far away I was, right? So what we do is we give you the tools necessary to be able to follow that regulation. And that just makes the regulators more comfortable knowing that those tools are available to our customers. Now, if that situation were to happen where somebody's flying in the FAA or flying, there's a protest down on Washington, or Wall Street or whatever, and the police called and said, don't let your systems fly there. It's not like we can go into our computer and all of a sudden all Phantoms can't fly there. That would be a firmware update that we would have to give that would say, don't take off if you're within this geographic region. Then you would have to update your Phantom's firmware to that new firmware, which would then limit it to that area, right? Again, the second point is that it would only limit it if you're flying in GPS mode.
Yeah.
So you have the ability to fly in attitude or manual mode and fly wherever you want, right? So, so I would just say that what we're trying to do as a technology firm is to give you, the user, the necessary tools to at least know whether you're supposed to be flying there or not supposed to be flying there, or supposed to go to that altitude or that radius away. And so we just give you the tools to, now, as a user, you don't necessarily have to follow those, but we're just working with legislators to make sure that you have the tools necessary to stay within whatever they're saying the regulation is.
So in the updated firmware with the new DJI Phantom, the city in China, is that the only city that the DJI Phantom can't take off because of GPS?
Yeah, so that's the only area that we've ever blocked so far for flying in GPS mode, and it's a very small, imagine it's like, hey, the U.S. government says the Washington Monument or the Statue of Liberty, we're very sensitive to that. It's
Area 51.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we would do it for Area 51, but it depends. Like, they would just come to us and say, this specific spot is very sensitive to us as a country. It stands for freedom, and the last thing we would want is for one of your systems to go crashing into the Statue of Liberty and get stuck up in the torch, and then people are making fun of it, and there's pictures about it, and that would be embarrassing to us as a country. And we would say, hey, we understand that situation, and what we're going to do is make an adjustment in our autopilot, in our algorithm, to not let it fly there in GPS mode. So at least the people who want to be respectful of that, because really laws are made for law abiders, right? And so the people who want to be respectful of that can fly in GPS mode, and they can know comfortably that they're not going to accidentally fly into that zone and get stuck in the Statue of Liberty's torch, right? But then you have your other people that may just choose to go in attitude mode, but we will say to the U.S. government, well, hey, look, we understood where you're coming from, and we did what we could to give your users, or our users, the necessary tools to stay away from that area. If they choose not to use those tools, there's nothing we can do about it.
Just with a clarification, people could opt out and not fly in GPS mode and still take off and still do that. But then it'll be more clear if they were in violation of the rules that they violated, which is reasonable. But we still have the choice to obey by those regulations or not.
That's right. So at least you would know, you would be making a cognizant decision to fly in attitude mode. You would know that, for some reason I'm not supposed to fly here, but I'm going to fly in attitude mode and fly anyways. But that's up to you as a user. We're not going to take that right away from you.
Just one more clarification, just to clear it up. If I go off GPS mode, I could still fly. It won't ban me from flying in there. A police helicopter is joined by a Fox News helicopter as they swoop in on the suburban area. 24 police vehicles from state, local, and federal agencies engulf this entire street and block off the roadway.
Yes, but it has its own constitution that I read and I studied.
Know what you're talking about first.
I have every right to film.
Know what you're talking about first.
If you're doing nothing wrong, you shouldn't mind me filming. If you're not doing nothing wrong, you shouldn't mind me filming. You're a public servant.